Keeping the scenic city safe. It can be a challenge for Tennessee's fourth largest city, one at the forefront of innovation, growth, and technology. But as the city continues to grow, so do some crime statistics, including crimes that put the city in the national spotlight. Tonight, we talk to Chattanooga's mayor and police chief and ask how efforts in the last year have paid off when it comes to fighting crime, the biggest challenges right now, and how they're staying ready and preparing for the future. Our News Channel 9 live town hall starts now.
Welcome to our News Channel 9 Town Hall, Safer Scenic City. I'm Josh Rowe.
And I'm Latricia Thomas. We know that safety is at the top of minds more than ever. That's why we're doing a deep dive tonight into how it affects one of our most populated hometowns.
Let's meet our panelists tonight. Mayor Tim Kelly, Chattanooga's mayor, has been for the mayor just under 3 years now. Chattanooga native, local businessman before all of that, going to City Hall. Thanks for being here today. We appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
Police Chief Celeste Murphy is also here. I've been about a year and a half on the job.
Yeah, almost 2 years.
25 years in law enforcement.
A little bit more, yeah.
Okay. About 20 years in Atlanta before you came here?
25 years in Atlanta.
25 years in Atlanta. So now we've got the quick resume in.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this before we get into stats and numbers and these kind of things. There's a lot of assumptions about the job of policing. What do you wish more people who are not police officers understood about the job?
Yeah, and that's where, the partnerships with you guys start. Getting the messaging out there about the good things that we do, some of the different aspects of the job, and just how much the officers and the investigators are dedicated with keeping the city safe.
We were at a summit earlier today about gun violence, mental health organizations there, people from the courts, you guys both there at times, talking to the community. And I asked you this question before. Some of them seem angry. Some of them seem like there's so much out there more to do. And one of the things that stuck with me that you said to them is, we're all in this together. There's not one name for all the stuff that's happening crime-wise. How do you look at all the different things that are happening and say, this is how we're going to make change?
Yeah, I think it started with what you're referencing this morning, and that's what energizes me. The only way that we're going to combat this is by doing this together, and that's one of the reasons why I chose the city, because I saw where, the trajectory of what was going on from city government, and I knew that, it would be a perfect fit for, my philosophy or my, the way I want to move when it comes to combating the safety of any city. It just seemed like it fit well. But when you talk about the frustration from this morning, it really is people are ready to energize together and come collectively together to help, because it's not just one. This problem is not just a police problem. It's not just the mayor's problem. We have to do this together. Yeah. And the only way we're going to combat this is together, and it'll be better that way.
Well, and what Chief just described is what's generally known in the business as community policing, that approach. And it's why we selected Chief Murphy. She has a long background in it, and we share that philosophy. When I came into office, we sort of wrote it all down in the One Chattanooga plan. Public safety is the baseline for all of that, right? I mean, if you don't get that right, none of the rest of it matters. But we do have to take this comprehensive approach. It's not just that we can, the police are just out there locking people up and forget it, right? We have to work. We opened an Office of Community Health at the mayor's office and really began to look at gun violence as a public health crisis, which is what it is. And I spoke, I guess, before you got there this morning, but it made me really happy, that frustration notwithstanding, to see all those community partners in the same room who understand that it is a continuum. This starts in community centers, it starts in schools, addressing the root causes of crime, so that so that we can prevent those shootings from happening. Because the police are going to do their job. They're going to enforce the law. That's 100% non-negotiable. But our job in city government, a layer or two deeper, is to stop that from ever happening to begin with.
I think the layers are interesting, right? Because this is not just, when you're talking about crime and what to do about crime, it's not just the police, it's not just the mayor's office. You got judges and prosecutors and state lawmakers and federal lawmakers. I mean, there's a lot, it's a complex system, right? How do you explain that as far as that goes, as far as what is your responsibility and where that, goes to somebody else and the whole, layers, like Mayor Kelly said.
Yeah. Well, first thing we got to remind people is that there's nothing wrong with doing having two strategies going on at the same time, the short strategy and the long strategy. So, of course, the short strategy is going to be law enforcement, because we do want to hold people accountable for these violent crimes in our city, to hold them accountable. So what we're doing good right now, CPD, is we are bringing a lot of these cases to resolution. We're bringing closure to these families and these victims. We're good at that, and we have been doing it. And we're sending a message that if you do commit a crime in Chattanooga, you're going to get caught. So that's the first part of it. And then the next piece is make sure that we hand, and thank goodness we do have a good relationship with our district attorney. We hand a complete investigation over to that entity, and then they carry the torch from there. So this is a collective and total relationship that we've got to have in combating crime.
Yeah, and the last part is the judicial system, right? There are areas where we may need judicial reform, and we have a great relationship with our delegation, and are comfortable having the conversations where that may be necessary. But Chief Murphy's not being as good a own cheerleader here as she should be. Our closure rate for crime here is almost 90%. The national average is around 50, and that's over the course of a couple of years. That is freakishly high.
What have you done to make that number change? What specifically helps push that?
It's all what I just said. It has to do with, one, making sure we're paying attention to some of those root causes and building programs that help. We look at what's in the forefront. We're worried about our children that may be going down the wrong path. Finding those programs and those collaborations and relationships with community, as well as government and police. Finding those spaces for children to be safe, as well as keep them on the right path. It's also, from the police aspect, we're doing things like finding grants and things like that to help us, support our budget, and finding technology advancements that help be a force multiplier, for us in our mission to combat crime.
I would also just say it's about two other things. Trust.
Right.
Again, it's not coincidental that these numbers went up when Chief Murphy came to work, because it really is about community trust. And when folks see somebody that looks like them, the department is improving in its trust. And our Chattanooga men and women of the Chattanooga Police Department are just good at their jobs. It's an excellent department with a long and storied history. So that's certainly part of it.
You talked about some of those numbers. We're going to get to some things you guys provided us in just a second. Another thing we have, Hamilton County's Health Department just released a public survey today. Most of the respondents were from residents of Chattanooga. It's a list of 27 issues, and they prioritize their concerns. The top 4 listed as major problems in the community were access to affordable housing, affordable child care, gun safety, which is one of the things we're talking about today, and substance abuse, in that order. And of the comments added by people who participated, most were related to health care. The second highest was under guns, crime, and violence. So we know it's on a lot of people's minds, obviously. Yeah, no,
again, when we opened the Office of Community Health, which we're still hard at work, and we work with the Hamilton County Health Department, we were I charged them with filling those gaps and looking at gun violence as a public health crisis, and it is precisely that. We also talk a lot about the social determinants of health, the things that lead people to bad health outcomes, including things like gun violence. And we talked this morning a lot about mental health. Right? Mental health is a huge need in our community, particularly with youth, and so we're working very, very hard to increase the provision of resources to youth and adults, but to address those mental health needs before they become somebody who's lost it with a gun.
And that's a part of what this morning was about. We had different stakeholders in the community there in one room, and what can you add to the pie to be able to help make this complete? We had community resources there. For instance, we had one of the speakers was Brother Kevin Muhammad from the Community Haven, who gave an example of how police and community work. They go into the community and try to provide resources and access to things that will help take a step back from the police needing to be there. And that's what we want. We want to have resources in the community so that we don't have to send the police in those areas unless it's something that we have to respond to. We want the community to be nourished before these things happen and it moves into a path where they become vulnerable.
Right.
Right. We still have a lot more to talk about with the mayor and the chief here after the break. We look back at some of the incidents that led to change from both city and county authorities.
Chattanooga became part of a larger national discussion on crime just less than 2 years ago.
That's when 6 teens were shot near the aquarium in 2022, and then just a month later, 3 people died and more than a dozen were hurt at a shooting on Macaulay Avenue outside of a bar there. One of the things that came to the forefront of that conversation, Mayor Kelly, your roadmap to end violence. Tell us some of the high points of that and how it's been going since then.
Well, again, as we talked about a little earlier, most of that relates to our work to address the root causes. We recruited a really great team, including Chris Sands, who work in the Office of Community Health, to work with youth to try to end gun violence interrupters, to intervene before these things happen. The police department also picked up some personnel to help them connect into the community through social media and other ways to stop these things before they happen. And the work is working. Again, a lot of the work with youth takes time, right? It will take years to pay off, but we need to sustain it and stay with it, and it is working.
I think some of the language around that in policing is focusing on the problem, not the crime. Is that part of what you guys talk about?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, speaking of Chris Sands and his shop, a lot of that is just collaborating with them on whether it be events, making sure, you know, we provide the security or just mentor kids, you know, any outreach that we can add ourselves to. And it develops relationships with the children, and so much so that, you know, it's creating programs for us within the department, because we're looking for ways to bring on young adults earlier on the department, be in the culture and employed by the department, and pipeline them hopefully to the police department in some type of role.
Yeah, I should also say we're part of a Partnership for Safety program that the U.S. DOJ, the Department of Justice, puts on. A lot of fantastic resources there, and going back to that, and our gun crimes unit is a really nation-leading, award-winning department. And again, if you can, that super high closure rate of almost 90%. Criminal Justice 101 is if you lock people up for a crime, that is the best single deterrent of crime, and we're doing a great job of that.
And you talk about guns. I know that some of the language, some of the focus has shifted across the years through different police administrations. You had a real focus on gang violence at one point. Then you had the Violence Reduction Initiative, and now more of a gun unit type thing. How does evolving that, is it hard to start another topic? Is it hard to start another focus? Or do you really see change when you narrow down in one thing like guns, like you guys have really looked into?
Right, so we're not necessarily just only focusing on guns. So, but that's where the majority of the violence can come from. But intelligence on gangs or any other genre is all intermingled within that. So, you know, whenever we use what makes our gun team so successful is that when they focus in on any crime related to a gun, regardless of whether it's involving a gang member, it's a domestic situation, or random, it doesn't matter. We're still going to do the investigation and bring resolution to that case. So they're all still intertwined with us focusing anything that's related to gun violence. It could be any entity that brings us to that crime. But it doesn't change the focus at all.
Right. I think when that change was made, which was actually before Chief Murphy came on, the idea was this is about the behavior, not who's doing the behavior. Again, we're going to follow the lead back to whoever's doing the behavior, but ultimately it is about the people who make the very poor decision to pick up a gun and use it in violent crime.
Right. Yeah. I think your office into some stats over the years and kind of looking at where your department is having some success and those kind of things. And if you look at it across the rate, across the line, homicides per 100,000 people compared to some other cities, some close and some not. Obviously, Chattanooga compares fairly to those cities as well. We talked about clearance rate as well. Chattanooga is doing well in that. When you look at some of these things, right, across the board, right, you can look at any metric and come up with your own, thought around it that is complex in some ways. But how do you think about it when you do see stats that show either progress or things that maybe are stagnant, and where you decide to make those decisions about what to address and how to address it?
Yeah. So what that does, the way those comparisons are laid out, it levels all the cities off regardless of population, right? It gives us a percentage per capita, and that's what evens the field with all of us. But what you do when you get that type of data is you say, okay, One thing we know we're getting right is we're getting our investigations to resolution. We have a great partnership in Chattanooga that's kind of unique. You know, when I speak to other chiefs in other cities, is that we have partnerships with our bordering municipalities around us, police departments, as well as our county departments, our state departments, as well as our federal departments. There's just a relationship there that intermingles the intelligence that all of us gather. We meet regularly. We talk regularly. There's no siloing of information, and that's what makes us a great success.
Can you explain that a little further, how it's different here than other places?
I wouldn't say that we're the only model of that, but it's from my own experience and from talking to other chiefs in other cities, we have a great relationship that between all of those jurisdictions that makes us such a success that others don't necessarily have that connectivity. A lot of it may be because of the size of our city, but at the end of the day, I'll take it. You know, it works, and we're going to keep using it.
When you talk about partnership too, the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office stepping in after the murder of Chris Wright downtown, saying we want to send our deputies there to help patrol. Has that helped?
Of course. Listen, when I first got here, the first meeting I had within a couple of months of me being here, I had every jurisdiction in the Hamilton County space, all the way up to state officials and federal officials, and we met at my headquarters, and I said, look, this is what I know, this is how I've learned that law enforcement works. We have to work together. So we've always been working. It was nothing new from that incident. It was intentional that we wanted the community to know that this is what's happening. So that's always been there, and this is their jurisdiction as well. So they have always enforced the law within this county.
I just want to say too, on the slide about homicides per 100,000, that is kind of the gold standard metric. And you hear a lot of things, right? And you know, you look at social media and people think Chattanooga is not a safe city. Look, one homicide is too many, period. I mean, that's a fact. But we are not even in the same ballpark as a lot of cities we're often compared to. And that's due to the hard work of the men and women of the Chattanooga Police Department.
And the main thing you want to look at is that we're trending down in the last 5 years on our homicides, and that's important. As long as we're tracking on a decline, and that's the, you know, that's what you look for. You know, again, one is too many, and I don't think anybody in any city in this country will say, you know, I'm going to get crime down to zero. You know, that's impossible.
Right.
But what we can promise is that our officers are going to work hard when it does happen to bring it to resolution.
Mayor Kelly, you made a great point there about the perception, like what you'll see on social media, that kind of thing, right? I don't think people really understand how high your clearance rate is. I don't think that's been said publicly enough. There are people quite, oh, I get it now.
Well, don't take this personally, but I think part of the problem is with the media environment and the social media, because we know that, you know, fear sells. And so if you're trying to build followers or sell advertising, a lot of times it's those stories that sell better. But we have some very good news to share here, and the fact of the matter is, I mean, all we can do is come and talk to you about things like this with the facts.
Well, we appreciate this open conversation and getting to the root of more of these, because the longer time we can take with it, the more we can really dig into some of these issues.
Deeper understanding for sure. Still more to get to today. I'm going to dig in more into youth crime and violence and a check on your forecast as well. That is after this break.
Well, this afternoon we were 1 degree shy of the 70-degree mark, a far cry from this time last week. And I hope you enjoyed the nice break from the Arctic chill and the heavy rain, because the heavy rain, that's coming back tomorrow, and that has us on weather alert. Flood watches are in effect, a low-end threat that a couple of storms could be severe, and an additional 1 to 2 inches of rain falling on already saturated ground has us weary of some flooding around. That's why flood watches are out through at least tomorrow evening. They'll expire. Different expiration dates very late through Saturday night, but second half of the weekend, Sunday, we should have drier weather returning, but a bit colder. So the radar view is a dry one now. A lot of clouds are in place. We've enjoyed a little bit of sunshine this afternoon, but more clouds and rain will drift in from the south and west. This is where all of our rain is coming from. And again, as I mentioned, there is a chance that a few of the storms could be strong to severe, mainly providing some strong wind gusts, slightly better chance just to our south from Birmingham, farther south through South Alabama. Most of us under that level 1 risk that a few storms may provide some strong damaging wind gusts and, of course, some frequent lightning and thunder. So we'll be tracking that as well, along with the flooding threat throughout the day. So here's the timing. Throughout this evening, not much going on. But after midnight, during the pre-dawn hours, here comes the rain, perhaps some thunder, giving you an early wake-up call tomorrow, and off and on periods of rain throughout the first half of the day. By lunchtime, maybe a little bit of a break before an afternoon round of rain and storms moves in. Finally, by tomorrow evening, most of the rain exits, and so does the warm air. By the time we get to Sunday, it's nothing Arctic as far as cold, but it'll feel more like typical day of January, with highs in the 30s and 40s, even a few scattered flurries across the plateau. No big deal, though. As far as the rain, though, it could be between 1 to 2 inches locally, but again, that's falling on already saturated ground, so it's like pouring water on a wet sponge. It's got nowhere to go but run off, so expect areas of flooding to result. So tomorrow, again, stay alert. We'll keep you updated off and on periods of rain, some embedded storms. Temperatures still warmer than average, though not as warm as today, with highs in the 60s. Once we are past tomorrow, we are dry for quite a while. Now, granted, it will cool down, but more typical for late January and early February. Highs in the 40s and 50s, and most morning lows in the 30s.
All right, David Glenn, thanks so much. Part of the discussion about crime also involves juveniles. And Chief Murphy, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So when you're looking at crime that involves juveniles, how does that differ for crimes that are committed by adults? How do the police look at that?
It doesn't differ from a law enforcement aspect. Of course, the judicial system is a little bit different, and that's where it changes course. Not our wheelhouse, but we still enforce crime regardless of age. But of course, you know, children are my passion. So, you know, besides just the law enforcement piece, I'm very tuned in and locked in with what else are we doing to get to the root reasons why that juvenile went the wrong path.
One of the things we spoke about today, or you guys spoke about at the summit, was social media and how it comes into the perception of what's going on in a juvenile's life, or showing off, or showing those guns, or I mean, things that we didn't have to worry about 20 years ago. How do you see some of that playing into the crime that's happening today and just their thought process behind it?
Yeah, well, it absolutely has a big influence on it, but the good part about it is the police are getting better at social media as well, so it's helping us in a lot of our investigations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have specific officers who sit there and peruse social media looking for, you know, things that are about to happen, things that are being threatened, that sort of thing?
We have certain units that specifically specialize in that, but I'll be honest with you, with the younger officers that we have out there, even the ones that answer 911 calls, a lot of them are all engaged with that same, you know, skill set as well. So we have a good portion of our police department that's really, really engaged with that.
When it comes to juvenile crimes, are there things that you wish the community understood, that they could do better, different policies that you wish, you know, were in place? How do you feel like things outside of policing could affect that?
Yeah, just the education that we provide. If we can just keep getting, you know, our messaging out to the community and them coming on board with us, we've got to stand united with this. The community's got to do their part, and we do our part together. Yeah.
And I should say too, Mayor Murphy, not quite there yet, but Chief Murphy and I are both members of the Children's Cabinet here locally, which is a really great organization. Includes Dr. Robertson from HCDE, the county mayor, county mayor's staff, Chattanooga 2.0 representatives, and the whole idea is to look at things through the lens of what's best for kids here. And COVID was a nightmare. I mean, as an epidemiological episode, obviously, but really, you know, I had a professor of public health speak to a bunch of mayors during the pandemic and say it was kind of like somebody put their hand in the middle of a waterbed and just pushed down, right? And it just flipped everybody off at the margins. And people went a little crazy, as we all know, right? And it had a terrible impact on kids. So there are a lot of kids who, we have a truancy issue here. We got to get kids back in school. We're still not back. We still don't have the level of kids back in school that we had prior to the pandemic, and that's got to change. So this is a whole of a community approach. It has to be, and we're doing some great work through the Children's Cabinet in order to make that happen. Because it really, again, you show me a kid who's not in school, who's 13, 14, 15 years old, I'll show you a problem that's coming.
And some of the issues that come along with that, one of the best speakers I've heard in Chattanooga is Judge Philyaw, one of the juvenile judges, talking about, you're looking at the crime, but what you don't see is an absentee mom, or being at home by yourself all night long, or not eating, or being, just so many of these things that play into these court cases and these crimes that people never hear about. They hear the crime, the end result.
Well, and Judge Philyaw is a member of the Children's Cabinet as well. He has some really, really constructive suggestions about how things might change. And I know, I'm told that may be something the legislature takes up at some point soon to think, how might we tweak or change juvenile justice reform for better outcomes.
Right. One of the things that's a success of the Children's Cabinet that we're really now getting the pulse on is that, we as adults, we craft what we feel should be best for the juveniles, but what Children's Cabinet does is it brings in the voice of the child. What makes you safe? What makes you feel safe? What are some strategies that we can do that you think will be more effective? So that's one of the successes of that.
And what have you heard from that? When you get the children to tell you what they want, what make them feel safe, what do you hear?
Well, a lot of them just want a safe place to have entertainment, play. Oftentimes, a lot of pieces that we miss are with education as well as nutrition. And that was one of the things that came up this morning. Kids are hungry. I just recently read an article about a school system that had to do a GoFundMe to pay off the debt of unpaid lunch balances, and that's just sad. Why do we have to fight to eat in school? It should be a part of our education, because that's what is one of the deficits in children being able to learn.
Yeah, and so much of this informs other work we're doing at City Hall. Affordable housing was up on that screen earlier. We talk a lot about that in Children's Cabinet. If you've got a kid that's bouncing from couch to couch, that child is at risk, right? And if they're not getting fed regularly, those are the interventions we sort of need to make to change. And a lot of this informs the way that we're looking at community development differently. And we're going through a big change there in city government to really look at community development centers or community centers as hubs for resources. A lot of what we're doing with the school system on this Community Forward Schools project is exactly that, using them as resource centers so that if a child is at risk and teachers or the principal sees that, they can connect them to nonprofit resources through that adjoining community center, and that work again is working.
The sustainable change and make sure that we tamp down any type of violence as it pertains to our children is to make sure that we do these things that are getting to that root. I mean, we just really have to put more energy into what got these children there, not about the act at the time that it's occurring. Let's focus on what got them there.
Right, and again, the kind of the crux of the One Chattanooga plan we talked about this morning is that we can't do this. Chief nor I in City Hall can do this alone. It has to be a whole community approach. And the number of people that were there from the faith community, from the nonprofit community is so encouraging, because it is going to take all of us together to fix this.
And we'll see some of those people that spoke this morning coming up a little bit later in our newscast. For now, though, after the break, our town hall continues. We look at the impact drug use has on our community and the challenges in controlling and prosecuting it. We hear about it all the time, drugs and overdoses taking a toll on communities. According to recent data from Hamilton Counted, 2022 compared to 2023 has seen a decrease in overdose deaths, but since 2018, fentanyl has remained the leading drug in fatal overdoses. According to Hamilton Counted data, fentanyl remains the driver in overdose deaths since 2018. It is a scary drug. It is out there. How often are you guys seeing it? Every day, all the time?
Yeah. It permeates through, the drug culture itself. But, successfully we've seen a drop 18% in our overdoses compared to last year. So, and I think that speaks to our enforcement efforts increasing. It's giving us a little bit more opportunity to go take the drugs off the street so they're not easily distributed. And so 18% more lives have been, been affected by that.
It's a big number in the right direction.
And, just in other areas as well, we've increased our DUI enforcement by about 22%. So we're taking unsafe drivers off the road, and sometimes in those cases you see where alcohol and drugs mix as well. So, we're really increasing our efforts in those areas to make sure we keep people safe. That was an alarming statistic for me, even coming from Atlanta, to hear about how fentanyl was crippling the community here.
Yeah. And when you're talking about the other things we talked about already, right, where you're not focusing on the crime, you're focusing on the people and the problem. With drugs, it's a very different problem because you can arrest people, you can do those kind of things, but that doesn't cure addiction.
Right.
When you think about that as a police department, how do you think about that as far as what do you do for the person long term to fix this, long term?
Well, it speaks to our co-response unit and why we have increased that. We want to, we don't want to victimize or we don't want to criminalize victims of that disease. But when a law is broken, we enforce it. But if we can mitigate an arrest from occurring, then that's the route that we want to approach. We want to more so go after the offenders that are putting that drug out there.
Sure.
Explain a little bit more about the co-response unit.
Yeah. So this actually started. I'd like to take the full credit for it, but it started right before I got here, and so we pair up an officer with a social worker, and it also helps us with our 911 responders. So they're able to see someone in crisis. They call that unit, and they go there and mitigate, do the therapy, do the resources, the outreach, whatever's needed, referral services that are needed to mitigate that situation, and then our officers can go out into the street and handle crimes and avoid violent crimes in our community. But it's been extremely successful, so much though that we were able to add another team, and we looked in the future to be able to increase that. It's been working wonders, and we're actually a flagship department for other cities that want to create that model as well.
Yeah, I'm not a criminal justice expert, but that was the one thing when Chief Murphy came on that we had already decided. I had done that research with my staff at other cities, and frankly, a little risky putting somebody out there who's a social worker in harm's way. But again, they've done a great job with it, and it has had tremendous effect. It worked exactly as we hoped it would, and so we look forward to expanding that.
At the end of the day, it's what we teach our officers is de-escalation. So they have an expertise that we don't necessarily have, but they're learning from each other. So the officer's there to make sure that the scene is safe, but the social worker dives in, does their job, and usually it's extremely successful.
Yeah, Mayor, you talked about not coming from a policing background, so to speak. There, when you're thinking about policing and resources they need, especially specifically in drugs and these kind of things, what's out there that you're looking at as far as what could help these folks down the road?
I mean, I read a lot, and I defer to the experts. I mean, again, they do a tremendous amount of, Chief Murphy and her staff take advantage of all the training available. I talk to other mayors who are in the same, I mean, you become sort of an armchair expert as a mayor at everything from policing to wastewater management, right? And so, and I try to be there as a resource and listen to the best practices and pick up and have full faith and confidence in Chief Murphy, and so I may suggest some things to her, but I let her run her department.
Yeah. Another department you said you work well with, the Hamilton County District Attorney's Office, obviously on the prosecution end. Now, we talked to District Attorney Cody Womp late last year about the focus for prosecuting people involved in drug crimes.
We are not trying to prosecute addicts. Of course, it's against the law to have and possess controlled substances. And I'm not saying you're not going to be charged and we're going to have to deal with that. I'm just saying that's not our focus. Our focus is on the high level dealers. There's always going to be addicts, and we need to focus our resources on helping those people, getting them off those drugs like Cadis is doing. We need to focus our prosecutorial resources on the big drug dealers, and that's what we're doing.
Sounds really similar to some of the things you're talking about, and also if you can get the dealer off the street, you can get some of that trickle-down effect.
Well, and I would echo what General Wamp said there. Cadis is a huge asset for Chattanooga. A lot of people don't appreciate how great an asset that is, but the real challenge for us in this community with the city and the county is to really expand those resources, both for addiction treatment and for mental health. And it is a challenge.
Yeah.
No doubt.
We've talked about the current obstacles for fighting crime here. After the break, a discussion about looking towards the future for the city.